Ethan had always dreamed of living off the grid, no noise, no people, no distractions. Just him, the whispering pines, and the endless stretch of forest. After years of planning, he finally moved into a small cabin deep in the Montana wilderness. The first few weeks were peaceful. The sound of the wind through the trees felt like nature's lullaby, and the crackling of the fire at night became his only companion. But that peace didn't last. One night, while he was chopping wood near dusk, he heard something moving through the trees, slow, deliberate footsteps that didn't belong to any animal he knew. He called out, thinking it might be a hunter passing by. No answer. Just silence, thick and heavy. Then, as darkness swallowed the forest, he noticed something strange, a faint light flickering deep between the trees, like a lantern swaying in the wind. Curiosity pulled him forward. He followed the light for nearly 10 minutes before realizing he was far from his cabin. Then the light vanished. The forest went dead quiet, no crickets, no wind, no sound. When he turned to go back, he saw footprints beside his own in the snow, fresh, large, and human. But he hadn't seen anyone. Panic gripped him as he hurried back toward the cabin, his breath fogging in the cold air. When he finally reached his door, he froze. Someone had carved something into the wooden frame. "You're not alone." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper of wind against the cabin walls made his heart pound. Around midnight, he heard slow, dragging footsteps circling the cabin. He peered through the window, nothing but darkness. Then, faintly, he saw it, a pale face pressed against the glass, grinning. He screamed and grabbed his rifle, but when he ran outside, the figure was gone. Only footprints led into the woods, and stopped suddenly, as if whatever it was had vanished into thin air. Days later, he found more signs: his tools moved, food missing, claw marks on the door. By the end of the week, he packed his things and left the wilderness behind, vowing never to return. Locals later told him that area was once home to a hermit who disappeared decades ago. Some said he went mad, others that he never truly left. Ethan doesn't talk about it anymore, but sometimes, in the dead of night, he swears he can still hear those footsteps outside his new home. Isolation is one of the most powerful tools of horror because it strips a person of all their safeguards: social contact, familiarity, and emotional support. In Ethan's case, his journey into the wilderness began as a pursuit of freedom. He wanted peace away from the noise of civilization, from people and the constant pressure of modern life. At first, the silence of the forest seemed soothing. The wind rustling through the trees, the steady crackle of the fire, and the absence of human chaos gave him a sense of calm. But as days turned into weeks, that same silence began to feel oppressive. It wasn't peace anymore, it was emptiness. The human mind isn't built to exist in complete solitude for long periods. Deprived of interaction and reassurance, the imagination begins to wander. Every shadow feels alive, every sound becomes a threat. Ethan's fear began not because of something supernatural, but because of the slow erosion of his sense of safety. The first night he heard footsteps in the distance, he couldn't tell whether they were real or imagined. That uncertainty is where isolation becomes truly terrifying. It blurs the boundary between reality and paranoia. In isolation, time distorts too. Days blend together, and nights feel endless. For Ethan, the forest became a kind of living entity, its silence watching him, its shadows breathing around him. When he saw the flickering lantern light, his curiosity was a natural human reaction to loneliness. The need for connection, even in a place where danger lurked, pushed him to follow it. But that choice led him deeper into fear, showing how isolation can manipulate even the strongest mind into making irrational decisions. The horror in this story isn't just about a mysterious figure, it's about how being completely alone changes perception. When Ethan saw the carved words "You re not alone," his fear magnified tenfold because he had no one to confirm or deny what he saw. Alone in the dark, his mind became both his only ally and his greatest enemy. Ultimately, this key point reveals that isolation doesn't just create fear, it becomes fear. The wilderness outside mirrors the wilderness within Ethan's mind, and as the story unfolds, it's hard to tell which one he is truly trapped in. The presence in the forest represents the core of the unknown, the invisible force that turns fear from imagination into terrifying reality. When Ethan first heard footsteps in the trees, he couldn't identify what or who was there. That uncertainty is where true horror lives. Humans fear what they cannot see or understand, and the forest, vast and untamed, becomes the perfect backdrop for something mysterious to hide within. The footsteps, the flickering light, and later the message carved into the cabin door are all signs of an unseen watcher, something intelligent, deliberate, and disturbingly close. At first, Ethan tries to rationalize it. Maybe it's a hunter, or maybe an animal. But as the nights grow longer, the evidence becomes harder to explain. The footprints are too large to belong to any animal, and the message "You re not alone" proves that whatever or whoever it is, it's aware of him. The horror deepens when the figure's behavior becomes more personal, almost predatory, circling his cabin and watching him from the darkness. The forest, once neutral and natural, transforms into a living, breathing threat. The presence doesn't need to attack Ethan directly to terrify him. Its power lies in observation. Knowing he is being watched strips away every sense of security he once had. It forces him into paranoia and helplessness. Each night becomes a test of endurance. Will the thing outside finally show itself, or will it remain just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment? This tension is what keeps Ethan trapped in fear, unable to sleep, unable to think clearly. Symbolically, the presence in the forest also represents the darker side of nature and human history. When the locals later reveal that a hermit once lived and vanished in that same area, the horror gains depth. Maybe it's a restless spirit, or perhaps the forest itself remembers the man who lost his mind there. This suggestion of an echo from the past blurs the line between natural and supernatural evil. In the end, the true terror of the presence is its ambiguity. Was it real, a ghost, a hallucination born from solitude? The story never confirms it, because sometimes the most frightening presence is the one you can't explain, but can still feel watching you from the shadows. Safety is the most fundamental human need, and when it collapses, fear becomes absolute. In Alone in the Wilderness, Ethan's cabin initially represents protection, his own small sanctuary against the harshness of nature. It's the one place he believes he can control: a roof, a locked door, and a warm fire. But as the story progresses, that fragile sense of safety begins to unravel. The moment Ethan finds the words "You re not alone" carved into his door, the illusion of security is shattered. His safe haven has been violated, and the terror becomes personal. This violation is psychological as much as physical. A home, especially one built by hand in a remote wilderness, carries deep emotional meaning. It's supposed to shield its inhabitant from the dangers outside. But when the danger crosses that threshold, it's no longer just a threat, it's an invasion. Ethan's realization that someone, or something, approached his cabin unnoticed plants the seed of constant paranoia. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind scraping against the walls, becomes a potential sign of intrusion. Sleep becomes impossible, and his mind starts breaking down from exhaustion and fear. The next major collapse of safety occurs when Ethan glimpses the pale face at his window. That single image represents ultimate vulnerability. The watcher outside is not just near, it's inches away, separated only by thin glass. The window, a symbol of openness to the outside world, now becomes a reminder that the boundary between him and the unknown is paper thin. The security of isolation turns to the horror of entrapment. He can't leave, and he can't hide. The claw marks on the door and the missing food show that the entity or the intruder has begun to claim control over Ethan's space. The cabin that once symbolized independence now feels like a trap, closing in around him. His tools are moved, his belongings tampered with, his privacy stolen. It's not just a haunting, it's a systematic dismantling of his stability. By the end, Ethan's decision to flee isn't just about physical survival, it's about psychological preservation. The wilderness took his peace, but the breakdown of safety inside his own home took his sanity. Once safety is gone, fear doesn't just surround a person, it lives within them. Horror doesn't always end when the danger is gone, it lingers in the mind, reshaping how a person sees the world. In Ethan's story, the physical escape from the wilderness marks only the beginning of a deeper torment, the haunting of memory. Though he leaves the cabin behind, the experience has carved itself into his psyche. The whispers of the wind, the sound of footsteps, the image of that pale face at the window, these memories remain vivid, surfacing whenever silence falls too deep. This lingering fear represents psychological trauma, a scar left by isolation and violation. Trauma in horror isn't always about monsters or ghosts, it's about what the mind does with terror after it's over. Ethan's sense of safety, once broken, never truly heals. He finds himself glancing at his windows at night, leaving lights on, and avoiding any sound of creaking wood. Even though logic tells him he is now far from that forest, his body and subconscious still react as if the threat is nearby. That's what makes his horror true, it's no longer confined to a place, it has followed him home. The story hints that the evil he encountered may not be purely supernatural. It could be the ghost of the hermit who once lived there, or it could be the echo of Ethan's own fear manifesting in isolation. The unseen evil becomes a metaphor for the darkness that hides in both nature and the human mind. The wilderness, vast and silent, becomes a mirror reflecting back his deepest anxieties and suppressed fears. Whether or not the figure was real no longer matters, the damage is the same. The haunting phrase, "You're not alone," continues to echo in his thoughts long after he leaves. It transforms from a literal warning into a psychological truth: Ethan will never be truly free of that presence. The memory watches him the way the figure once did from the edges of consciousness, unseen but always there. Ultimately, this key point emphasizes that horror isn't just about what happens, it's about what remains. Ethan's story ends not with resolution, but with a chilling reminder that evil doesn't need to stay in the forest. Sometimes, it takes root in the mind, where it can never be escaped. Months after Ethan fled the wilderness, he tried to rebuild a normal life in a quiet suburban town. He avoided talking about what happened, people wouldn't believe him anyway. Still, the nightmares never stopped. He would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing phantom footsteps on the wooden floors, the whisper of the forest still echoing in his mind. One cold winter night, as snow began to fall, Ethan sat by the window with a cup of tea, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The room was silent, except for the ticking of a clock. Then, faintly, from outside, came a sound: 3 slow, deliberate knocks on his front door. He froze. No one ever visited this late. Heart pounding, he crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. There was no one there, just a faint trail of footprints in the snow leading up to his porch. But the strangest thing was, there were 2 sets of prints, one leading toward the door, and another leading away as if someone had already been inside. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, his eyes shifted to the door frame. Carved faintly into the wood, just above the handle, were the same words he'd seen in the wilderness, "You re not alone." The cup slipped from his hand and shattered. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. From the darkness behind him came the soft, dragging sound of footsteps crossing the floor. And then, in the faint reflection of the window, Ethan saw it. That same pale, grinning face staring back at him.